Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Tonight we will delve into Pakistan's economic outlook as we are moving towards economic stability. The latest figure from State Bank of Pakistan and international institutions, including IMF, show a positive outlook. Foreign exchange reserves have surged $9.466 billion as of September 2024. And when we talk about remittances, they are expected to surpass $28 billion. With inflation dropping to its, of course, lowest level since October 2021, Pakistan is edging towards economic stability. And we are also moving towards the IMF program, as IMF is preparing to discuss a $7 billion bailout package later this month. In today's program, we will be talking about what to expect from this bailout package and how this is going to be leading Pakistan towards economic stability, and what will be the challenges when we talk about, of course, economic outlook of Pakistan. To discuss this and more, we have a very eminent panel of economists with us today. We are joined in the studios by Dr. Usman Chohan, who is advisor on economy, CASS. Welcome to the program, which is a think tank. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Hummayun Iqbal Shami, who is President Pakistan Economic Forum. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Ali Salman, who is Executive Director Prime. Welcome to the program. Dr. Usman, let me start with you with this positive news that, of course, after a while, Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves have surpassed, of course, are showing a positive trend and have surpassed a limit of $9.466 billion. How do you see, do you think this is a first step towards economic stability, and of course with the context of recent hurdles that Pakistan have been facing, how do you view this?
It's an excellent question you've asked, because reserves have been a concern for many emerging markets, including for Pakistan. And over the last 2 years, we've faced a crunch collectively in the world in terms of the ownership of reserves. And there's been a big draw of reserves, which has been energy prices. So if you correlate the declining energy prices in the world, you can expect that the demands on the reserves won't be so high. And at the same time, remittances are going up again, so increases, further inflows in our reserves should be expected. So overall, it's not just that our reserves are at a initially good level now, but that we can expect them to continue to rise over the near term.
In your opinion, Dr. Usman, what were the key measures that lead to this, of course, first step towards achieving this number of reserves? Well, because we know that we have had dwindling, of course, reserves for quite some time now.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The set of measures that our government had to take were actually quite difficult. They were a difficult pill to swallow. For example, raising the interest rate to an astronomical level. It was unpleasant, but it had to be done. And now it's being lowered gradually, perhaps too gradually. And at the same time, there was a big hit taken by businesses in order for that to happen. At the same time, we were trying to maintain the modicum of fiscal stability. At the same time, we were in discussions with the IMF. So fighting on many fronts to avert a very difficult scenario which many emerging markets faced, and I think we've done a good job on that front.
Right. Mr. Hummayun, when we talk about, of course, this situation, the State of Bank of Pakistan reduced the interest rate by 200 points, basis points, and this is one of the largest cuts since April 2020. How do you view this situation, and how do you view its impact on the businesses and investments?
Actually, the monetary policy, has a direct connection with the inflation rate of this country. And when the inflation rate was going up, so obviously we had to increase the monetary rates also, discount rates. And that also was a condition imposed by the IMF. So we had no other option except to do it. Though it was very, damaging for the business, because if you are borrowing at the rate about 24 or 25% of the bank, so it is very difficult for a businessman to run his business. But now when the inflation rate is coming down, and now in the last figure which was shown for the August, it was about 9.7. So it decreased from almost, which was highest was about 32-33%. So it has come down definitely. And basic factor behind the decreasing in the inflation rate was the food prices, because we have seen that the agriculture government did not buy the wheat on the fixed price, and that was open. So obviously that the wheat prices slashed, and along with that, when you have the cut in the wheat prices, overall the inflation gets down in the country like Pakistan. So whereas this is concerned that 2% has been cut down, some businessmen, they wanted it should be about 5 or 6%. But I think that it was a wise decision. First of all, that this 9.7% inflation rate is for 1 month, So if you say it, keep it counted from 1st January to now, so it's about 17-18% inflation rate. So this is only for a short period. We cannot say that it will be reduced further, because there are lots of factors behind it.
Right.
So
right.
they are caution. And the second thing is this, that they don't want that inflation should again rise. And then another factor which is behind not cutting very drastically was that they want to control the currency price also.
Right.
Because if you have the if you lower down the interest rate, so then definitely people will start buying the dollars, and they will start saving in dollar, so it can increase their price
Right,
also.
and taking the same point to Ali Salman Saab, how critical is the stability of dollar when we talk about Pakistan's economic outlook, especially given the increase in foreign reserves?
Well, exchange rate stability has been a fundamental, macroeconomic indicator for Pakistan's economic outlook for forever, because we are a country which is integrated with the world economy. So all our decisions, whether it's petroleum imports or long-term investment in the power sector, are linked with the exchange rate. So already we have seen the negative impact of devaluation of Pakistani rupee, in terms of dollars on our businesses and also on the current account deficit. So I think for last, I would say 6 months to almost 1 year, we have done a reasonably good job in maintaining a stability, in maintaining a stable exchange rate and keeping the dollar at about 278 rupees. This should certainly help in terms of business decision making, but also and more importantly on reducing the balance of payment deficit. And that's why I think we have actually made a significant improvement in reduction of the BOP deficit.
Right. And Dr. Usman, when we talk about the upcoming meeting with IMF, how significant in your opinion is this meeting for Pakistan to, of course, secure this extended fund facility, and especially when we talk about the looming debt crisis?
Oh, it's an excellent question, because our discussions with the IMF have been premised on very severe stipulations. They have asked a lot from us, and we have taken reform very seriously, and we have gone about it in multiple directions. Particularly the federal government has taken a big chunk, and it has faced resistance every step of the way domestically, because the consumer and the ordinary person has also suffered tremendously. That is the background in which this next conversation will happen. The assumptions that the IMF has had are not up to date with how inflation is coming down, how the foreign governments, how foreign economies might be going into recession, how energy prices are going down. The world context is changing, and so that will influence very much how this conversation happens. But I believe that we should stick to the essence of the program to shore up our fiscal position, so that ultimately you and I both want that we never go to the IMF again.
Right, and that was my next question, because whenever we discuss economy, we keep on discussing about the long-term plans and how this is the 25th time that Pakistan is looking towards IMF, and the recent statement from Finance Minister also states that this is do or die situation for Pakistan when we talk about this upcoming meeting with IMF. So how long are we going to be relying on this, and how do you think that this loan is going to be playing a part in maybe moving a baby step towards economic stability?
Yes, well, I ideally would not see this as a baby step, but in fact that we take a major step towards reform. because what is being asked of the people in terms of energy costs, in terms of inflation, in terms of the cost of living crisis, all of this cannot be considered a baby step. It's actually very demanding. So what I want is that the IMF wants a diversified portfolio of recipients. They also don't want to lend exclusively to Pakistan, Argentina and Ukraine. They want a bigger variety. And Pakistan also wants to have not just emergency funding, but also investment and business activity and a stable environment. So in the end, both sides want the same thing, that things are okay, but there's not heavy reliance of one or the other. So I see that happening if the global economy has a modicum of stability, and if we continue on the reform path, it's certainly achievable.
Right, and Hummayun Sahab, of course, when we talk about Pakistan's ongoing dealings and meetings with IMF, Pakistan met some of the key conditions set by IMF and increased, of course, tax revenue by 40% and energy prices have also been increased. Do you think these steps are going to be leading towards long-term economic growth?
Obviously, we are lacking behind for the GDP to tax ratio, so which is a basic concern for that. But the thing is this, that whereas this 40% tax target which has been fixed in the it seems unrealistic for me, because on the 12th June also on the PTV, on the budget transmission, I said probably it will not be achievable. So you have to come up with another mini budget, which people are thinking, because last month we have seen a shortfall about 100 billion for 1 month. So I mean, it might worsen the situation. But I think that the thing what we have to see, we have to also focus on the budget deficit. We have to streamline the budget deficit, so we have to cut down our expenses also. Lots of expenses we are doing, federal government which are in the domain of the provinces, or which the services providing to the provinces like DESCO, BISP program and lots of other, and still they are holding lots of ministries, lots of departments which they are cutting down, but it's not very easy to do it. So because and then you have to broaden the base of the tax,
Right.
to bring those people into net who are not already in the net, like
Right, a number of
retailer
sectors.
instead
Right.
to increase budget for those taxes for those people who are already paying, as we have
Especially
seen,
salaried class.
not salaried, and including every business people also is hurt, because now almost if you look at the highest rate of tax, that come about 40-45%, so the businessman, when he's earning 100 rupees from his, from day night workings, and is giving 45% directly to the government. So I think no businessman will like this. So it is also injurious for the growth of the business in the country. So I think tax rates should be cut down, and that tax, if you slash the tax rates, I am sure that the base of the taxes will definitely widen, because people will see, okay, when the tax rate is not very high, why should we avoid it, why should we bribe to the tax inspector, why should go for this, instead to go, okay, pay the tax 20%, 15%. I think it's because in India the highest tax is 18%. So
Right.
we have about 40% now, super tax and this tax. So I think tax rate should definitely be cut down. So
Right, and diversify it.
diversify.
Include more sectors into the tax
Agriculture
base.
is there. Agriculture, there is no tax on
Real
the
estate.
real estate. Actually, there is a lots of confusion about the real estate. The real tax is not tax, because thing is this: you have to see it that now when we have imposed more taxes on the real estate, so that overall tax quantum, the revenues has instead to increase, that has decreased, because the transactions have affected this, like same in the stock exchange, where when you increase the rates, the transaction go down. So from every transaction government earns actually in any way, for the registration, for the taxes, So if you, you should always see that the transactions should not affect from this, because it depends. The economic circle depends upon the transaction, how many
Right.
transaction, quantity of the transaction. So which should not be affected. through the taxes.
Right, but Mr. Ali, of course, for a common man, inflation remains a key issue. And when we look at the figures, of course, since October 2021, inflation has dropped by around 9.6%. In your opinion, what were the key drivers that lead to this drop, and do you see this to be sustainable in the long term or in of course, few months?
Well, I think first of all, I like to slightly address the topic of the IMF program, because that is very
Please go
relevant to the discussion. You know, one thing is very clear, that always in the past when we have approached to the IMF program, I think our approach has been at slightly delayed in terms of like when do we need to approach IMF. So when the crisis is huge, and when you are looking for significant external support like rollovers, we are looking for rollovers, we are looking for other countries to help us, the room for negotiation for the government reduces. And then of course you have to accept very harsh conditions like very high tax rates or tax targets, which are proving to be detrimental for the economic growth in general. Now, reduction of inflation on a year-to-year basis is certainly a good news. So let's all acknowledge that. And this doesn't mean that the prices are coming down. This only means that the prices are not rising at the same speed. Let's say a few months before, on a year-to-year basis, the prices were rising about 40%. But now over the few months, it has come down to 9.6%. So, and the factors have been partly commodities, which we have, the prices have gone down, including the petroleum prices. Also because the main driver of our inflation, especially when we come to the low-income household, is food, wheat, dairy products, and the prices have remained stable or come down in some cases. So I think these are the main factors, and that's why I think they're also.
And is it sustainable in the long term?
It is only
that we are witnessing this decreasing trend.
Yes, the current forecasts are it will go down further, and I think the long-term target of the State Bank is to bring the inflation in the rate of 5 to 7%. And the way I see it, they are moving to the right direction in that sense. But of course, for that to happen, you also need to increase the productivity, agriculture productivity in particular. But we also need to increase, the production level, the exports level, and keep the trade open. Because sometimes we have these restrictions on the trade, which also drives up the local products. So to keep the inflation on track, we need to see these factors. But another factor which is important is government spending. Because one of the key driving factors which we have not discussed normally is how government-owned spending and government-owned borrowing from the commercial sector, about 60% of our loans from the banks go to the government. These are the measures which also drive up the inflation rate. And this is like what we call like demand side of the inflation.
Right.
And that is something which I think government needs to check, and it can be checked by a fiscal policy side. And markets have very little role in influencing that. So we need that. I think there's a risk also when we bring the interest rate. There's also risk that because government's own appetite for loans is quite high, the reduction of interest rate may mean in the absence of private sector that the loans to the government will increase, and that will eventually bring up the inflation again.
Right.
And then the risk to the inflation is the energy tariffs.
So there are a number of challenges when we talk about sustaining this decrease.
And
in
energy tariff is one of them.
Right, of course. And I also want your take on the point that Mr. Hummayun earlier alluded to, that is tax to GDP ratio. Pakistan has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratio, that is 10%, which is one of the lowest in the world. In your opinion, how are we going to address this issue?
In my opinion, I think this debate of increasing the tax to GDP ratio without increasing the economic growth, without increasing the economic transaction is slightly misplaced. I think first of all, we also need to see, from which points or from which aspect that can we cut the expenditure of the federal government, because obviously you need to increase taxes because you need to perform certain government functions. So while I know that government is chasing the target of following, let's say, the 15% tax to GDP ratio, but then if it comes at the cost of the economic growth, then it will not be sustainable. So while I think it is important to increase the tax base and reduce the tax rates, it will help in increasing that ratio, but it should not be, this is not a target which we can follow exclusively without addressing economic growth.
Right, and of course, when we talk about economic growth, trade deficit is one of the issues that Pakistan has been facing, and there is, of course, surge in trade deficit by 19.7% in July, when we look at the figures, July 2024, due to increased imports. How do you think we are going to address this issue, Dr. Usman?
This is an excellent point because it is not easy to solve this imbalance. Our exports fall behind our imports by a long shot. Over the last 3 years, you have seen an engineered decrease in our imports. It was done on purpose, and unfortunately, the way our production mechanisms work, we require imports to drive our exports. There's capital imports for industry and whatnot. We do need things from abroad to send things abroad. This is a connection that we have to keep in mind. If you start to remove the controls that you have put on imports, you will naturally see this lagging demand. People have been requiring imports for a long time. That has to be done at some point. And at the same time, our exports are not focusing the same level of quality as well as quantity to compete in world markets or to find niches, which requires market research. A lot of that hard leg work
And
has to be
skilled
done.
workers.
And skilled workers to work on that, as well as skilled management to drive that. And part of the gap can be filled by remittances, but remittances can be cyclical. There is also a political element to that. There is also the integration of your migrants into the local society, so they may not need to send back as much in the long run. So you have to find gaps around this, and the best way to do it, of course, I think is the indigenization of production, so you don't need as much from abroad. Now, some parts of your import bill are required for now, for example, your energy. But if you rework the architecture of energy and transport in your society, you won't actually need that much from outside.
Right, but at the same time, of course, we do need that. So what kind of strategies, in your opinion, are required to keep pace of exports with the imports?
Well, above all, I think good market research is required because we don't actually know where our highest demand abroad might be. The second is working on quality control in our products. The third is on the energy. The cost of energy for our producers is extortionary. They actually cannot compete on the cost structure. And the fourth is on investing in labor market, so improving the quality of labor market. These four things, if you do, you already get a leg up in emerging market category for exports.
Right, and Mr. Hummayun, the same question when we talk about Pakistan's export sector. Of course, there are issues of low productivity and other issues. But in your opinion, what kind of structural reforms or changes are required at this point in time?
About to increase the exports?
Yes, yes.
Basically, we have a very, small industrial base in this country. So we have very little exportable surplus in the country. So we have to increase, our own productivity and then also the quality of that. So basically, our only, exportable surplus we have only in textile, or we have some rice or some surgical goods or something, So these are already the, the markets which are available. European, mostly this go to USA or European Union somewhere. So you already have a fixed buyer. So this is why Pakistan, Pakistan cannot export much, as it is. I mean, the growth in our export is not very high, as comparing to other countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, or something. So first of all, we have to create more and more exportable surplus in this country. And for creating more and more exportable surplus, what you need to increase the industrial base. Industrial base, you can give one thing. I told you that when your interest rate was about mandatory rate was 22 or 23%, and the banks were loaning for about 26 or 27%. So how they can compete? That's very difficult that they can compete with this cost of production. They cannot, because you have to be competitive in cost also, in quality and cost also, both. And then the energy cost. The textile people, they say they have two issues. I have talked to the Aptoma people. They said they have basically two issues. One issue is in the energy cost, which is almost 15 cents here in this country, as comparing to about 6, 7 or 8, 10 cent in China, and about the same in India, and maybe 10 in the Bangladesh. But we have very high cost, so we cannot compete. And second
But
thing is,
Hummayun sahab, at the same time, government is also renegotiating contracts with, of course, private
IPPs.
of course, investors as well. So, do you think this is going to be attracting these investments?
It will, but it will. That is a long process, you know, because that's the when you touch the international contracts, it got a lot of legal complications. But I think that if the government is really serious to do to renegotiate with the IPPs, I think first of all the government should have been done by now, and at least they can start it now, that they should have a forensic audit of all the IPPs. How much actual the cost they have incurred here, and how much profit actually they have earned, and how much their heat level was there, how much they consumed the energy, and how much actually they produce. So, if the forensic audit by an independent, a third party is done, carried out, then even you can change the international contracts. Then they will have no room even to what we are fearing, that they might go to the international arbitration. So, then if there is a I mean, there is an element of guilt in it, or there is an element of corruption in it behind the agreement.
Right,
so
right.
then
These
it will be
remain
very difficult.
challenges, of
So
course.
government has to go from these problems instead to go straight away giving the statements. I mean, that they will do this, unless you don't have a lever if you have a forensic audit and you got those things, you know, then you have a lever to negotiate, renegotiate. So negotiation will be very easy for them.
Right, but Mr. Ali, when we talk about, of course, despite these challenges, there are positive indicators as well. Let's talk about that. With Pakistan moving towards economic stability, of course, Pakistan is going to be attracting foreign direct investments as well. In your opinion, what sectors are most likely to benefit from that, and how should Pakistan prepare for those investments?
You see, when we talk about exports, when we talk about foreign direct investment, these are mostly the effects of a business environment. When you're looking for international markets, or you are bringing international markets into the country, they will be influenced by, for instance, the tax policy, the exchange rate policy, customs tariffs. So two things I would like to mention when we talk about FDI. So and also related with exports. So first of all, I think we should remember that for a very long time we have artificially controlled the exchange rate. Now, and at the cost of our own competitiveness. This policy has hurt the exports. This policy has also given negative signals to the FDI, to foreign investors. We've also in the year 2022-23, we also stopped the repatriation of their profits. So these are the measures in terms of the reform, custom tariff reforms, which we need to address to bring the FDI in Pakistan. In last 10 years or so, the major driver or the major source of FDI in Pakistan was CPEC. Now certainly
yes,
this is
CPEC, and also I want you to, of course, shed light on the significance of SIFC as well when we talk about Pakistan's long-term economic stability and what goals we should be having.
So first of all, I think let's acknowledge that CPEC was helpful in bringing fresh FDI in the country. Part of that was direct investment, part of that was loans in the power sector, infrastructure. So we'll, I hope that the rising level of economic growth will help us in repayment of those liabilities. So that's one important. The other point is that when the SIFC was established, the primary goal of SIFC was to actually diversify the foreign investment and looking and bringing the FDI from Gulf countries and the other countries as well. I think that almost 1 year or so has passed since the SIFC was established. We have seen some improvements in regulatory environment. As I mentioned, the business environment matters for all potential investors in the country. But we definitely want to see more mainstreaming of those reforms. Reforms should not be linked with particular country or transaction or company. That is my main sort of message when we look at the reforms in the structure of business climate. SIFC has been helpful in removing some administrative hurdles which our investors have been facing, which is a welcome step. But it has not mobilized any significant amount of foreign direct investment in the country so far. We hope that it does in the future, but it has not happened, I think, and that will bring us back to the fundamentals of the economic environment which we have outlined before.
Right, and Dr. Usman, of course, the federal government had recently reduced the prices of course, fuel as well. Do you think this is going to be boosting confidence of potential investors? And in your opinion, how significant are such moves for attracting investors in different sectors in Pakistan?
It is possible that the investor community considers the energy cost or the fuel cost reductions, but the biggest advantage of reducing the fuel cost is on the consumer. And we need to provide as much relief to the consumer right now as possible, because as you have extensively discussed, the tax rates, the energy tariffs, and all of this impact consumers in devastating ways. A very good way, you see, as inflation has increased, the whole world has suffered inflation. The whole world has started to understand and build narratives around inflation that are very interesting. The American media has now called this a country buster. Inflation busts countries. And so fighting inflation should be our primary thing. We are benefiting from a reduction, but as was correctly discussed by my dear colleague, Dr. Salman, it's the slowing of the rate. It's still increasing. So inflation remains a challenge. So bringing the fuel costs down in a measured way eases it on consumer, and we don't want any countries anywhere to bust. We want them to be resilient. In that context, we have to look at the fuel price reduction and any other easements that make it easier for them.
Right, and when we talk about different sectors, of course, agriculture remains one of the important sectors in Pakistan's economy. But with the recent taxation reforms in agriculture sector, how do you think this is going to be impacting, especially the small farmers, and what needs to be done to address the challenges that they are going to be facing?
Yeah, this is an excellent and complex question. Our target above all should be that agricultural yields rise. That's our fundamental target, because we have a fixed amount of land. We can irrigate, we can have better technology and all that, but we have a finite endowment of land. And how we make use of that will change given two factors. One, the increase in our population. So we produce an enormous amount of wheat in Pakistan, but yet it is also becoming insufficient because our population is increasing. And the second is urbanization, because urbanization is pushing into prime agricultural land. Even in Islamabad, you're pushing out the good stuff. This is making it hard. At the same time, agriculture is a very problematic sector historically. Many people who had agriculture in West Pakistan were unionists basically, and that unionist legacy of intervening in politics has been terrible for us. So even 75 years later, you're talking about taxing agriculture as if we became independent from the British yesterday. It is quite ridiculous. So the politics of agriculture in this country are very, very acrimonious, and dealing with it until we came to a situation like we have now, we weren't even able to raise the subject.
Right, and Mr. Hummayun, energy crisis remains a key issue still for Pakistan today, and with increase in electricity prices, do you think it's high time that we should be looking towards alternate, of course, resources or sources, and what solutions should we be looking towards, especially in the short term?
The thing is that now we have, we have seen the renewable energy, particularly we have seen the solar. Every, at household level, they are getting benefit from there, and lots of people giving it a net. I mean, there's a green meter, the net metering, and so they are supplying it to the government also. I don't think that at present that the government should have more plants, should go further in producing the electricity, because already our installed capacity is over 42,000 megawatt, and we are consuming 25 or something, So and well, for about 12 or 15,000 megawatt, we are just paying the capacity charges, and that is the basic reason for our for our electric energy costs, where how we are, and so this is, I think, then our agreements are in the dollar, so with the increase of dollar, decrease depreciation of the currency, the prices, IPP prices, they going up, so we are seeing, so end up with just hush up. So I don't think that the government should go up for next for few, as they are thinking that they will go for renewable project, this, but government should not go for any further power sector projects, because
Right.
let it go to the private sector if they need it. Because the thing is this, that already the 15,000 megawatt, if you make maybe a cheaper, get the project a little cheaper than where we are producing. So how we can get rid of though from the already accumulated, this is the capacity charges that will remain the same. It means that we will pay at the same time, we will pay the existing and
Right,
capacity
right.
charges, and plus for the new projects. So it will just double our debt also. It will just increase the price of that. So let it, the basic thing is that to have more consumption. So slashing some rates, particularly in the winter, because in the winter our demand becomes hardly 10%,
Right,
10,000.
right.
So and then we should increase our consumption in the say that our industrial sector should grow. Our
Right.
industry, if our industrial sector grows, because industry is the main consumer of the power actually in the country. So if we increase the our industrial base, they will do that, and then there will be no capacity charges, no idle capacity charges. So obviously
Right, right.
that price will go down. So
Right, Mr. Ali, we keep on hearing from economists that Pakistan needs a 10-year comprehensive economic plan. In your opinion, what should be key pillars of such economic plan?
Well, I think it's a very vast question, but I'll happy to share my thoughts
Yeah,
on that.
3 to 5 points.
So I think one of the key point is that the growth. We all should be looking at higher level of economic growth. Pakistan needs to grow its economy at 6 to 7% every year at least for next 10 years. And how do we do that? Typically we have looked outside, typically we have looked for investment or exports. I think the key driver from my perspective is that we need to look inside the potential that Pakistan's own economy have, potential which Pakistani entrepreneurs and investors, innovators in various sectors such as information technology, we certainly have a lot of potential there. In fact, if you notice that a lot of our income which we earn are parked outside Pakistan because the financial environment is not conducive. So apart from economic growth, the other part should be certainly tax reforms, as earlier highlighted. I agree with Mr. Hummayun Shami there that going forward, and this is highlighted by a report which Prime and PIDE published jointly this year, in which we have presented a complete blueprint of a tax overhaul plan. The current direction of tax policy is opposite to what we would like to see in Pakistan. We would like to see, regardless of source of income, everyone who is liable to pay income tax should pay income tax. There should not be any exemptions, and the rates should be lowered. And the third thing is, I think, a long-term focus. How do we increase the productivity? If you look at the labor productivity, it is one of the lowest in the world. Even when you compare with like in the region, China, Bangladesh, India, our labor productivity has been falling behind. For that, we need to invest in skills, we need to invest in their education, we need to also invest in the improvement of the capital and the technology which we are deploying in the agriculture sector and also in the manufacturing sector. So those are probably 3 points which I would like to mention as pillars of long-term economic plan.
Right, and very briefly, Dr. Usman, when we talk about the signs of revival that Pakistan's economy is showing, and of course Pakistan is expected to show increased growth in coming years, how do you think that the government should ensure that this growth is inclusive? It doesn't benefit the wealthy but the lower class as well.
Excellent point about inclusivity. I think that what we have to keep in mind is that we are still a very stratified society. So as long as you can reach out to the bottom rungs economically, socioeconomically, you'll be doing a good job. In Pakistan, that involves infrastructure spending because there are parts of Pakistan that are quite remote, psychologically as well as infrastructurally. So reaching out to them adds to inclusivity. There is a very strong cultural gender element in this too, because more than 50%, if not exactly 50%, are women, and their labor force participation is still falling short by world standards. Take any metric. And they have so much potential, especially because it's a young country. So the youth inclusivity, then the youth plus women inclusivity is already one big factor. Plus disparities within regions have to be addressed in the best ways through infrastructure. Already you would have a much more inclusive economy.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chohan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Hummayun, Iqbal, Shami, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Salman, for joining us in today's program. Of course, as we conclude today's discussion, it is clear that there are a number of challenges when we talk about Pakistan's path towards economic stability, but still there is hope when we talk about the recent increase in foreign reserves and the other, of course, measures that the government is taking. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.